A new FBI report released just hours ago showing that the South is seeing the highest number of reported human trafficking cases compared to other parts of the country.
And federal authorities say human trafficking networks are increasingly using airports and international cargo routes to move victims across borders.
Every year, more than 30,000 private jets land at American airports under the absolute legal protection of diplomatic immunity. We are told the diplomatic seal is a symbol of international trust. But what if that legal shield was actually a license to traffic human lives? According to federal investigators, just 48 hours ago, a $5 billion shadow empire was dismantled at New York's JFK Airport. They didn't sneak past customs, they walked right through the VIP doors. They used the United Nations Diplomatic Corps to move 6 tons of pure heroin and living victims inside premium luggage. They didn't just break the law, they bought the people who enforce it, including 8 sitting federal judges. Follow this story carefully because the evidence that 500 agents found hidden inside that private terminal is shaking the globe right now. Subscribe to uncover the truth. 100,000 victims did not disappear by accident. They were transported directly through international transit systems with the help of corrupt officials. Containers moved, bags were loaded, and for months no one inside the system asked questions. But what investigators discovered behind a heavily guarded terminal door did not just end a massive covert investigation. Federal authorities thought they knew about who had been protecting the Sinaloa cartel on the East Coast. John F. Kennedy International Airport is a fortress of aviation security. Highly regulated grid where dogs, high-tech X-ray machines, and heavily armed customs officers scrutinize every single bag and passenger. But that is only true for the general public. There is a second invisible airport operating on the exact same tarmac. Terminal 4's VIP Private X. A restricted, elite's own. Reserved for billionaires, foreign dignitaries, and United Nations delegations. Here bags are not scanned. Passports are barely checked. But that lost the worst part. What happens when the absolute legal protection of diplomatic immunity is sold to the highest bidder? What happens when international law is weaponized against the very people it was designed to protect? This is not just a story about a massive drug bust. This is a minute-by-minute declassification of a federal nightmare, a system compromised so deeply by global elites that investigators are still trying to calculate the true human cost. 145 John F. Kennedy International Airport, New York. Under the heavy, suffocating darkness of a New York night, Flight 10 for 147. UN touched down on the private tarmac of JFK International Airport, their faces hidden behind the collars of expensive coats, stepping directly into 3 waiting, heavily armored Cadillac Escalades. But the real payload wasn't the passengers. It was the luggage. Private ground handlers carefully unloaded 12 heavy, reinforced titanium golf club travel cases. Each case weighed an estimated 180 pounds. Under normal circumstances, cargo of this size would be immediately flagged. But this flight was different. It carried Class 1 diplomatic status. According to Title 22 of the United States Code, Custom and Border Protection officers were explicitly and strictly prohibited from opening, tracing, or even delaying this luggage. It was a federal crime to interfere. The cargo was marked for immediate, unquestioned bypass. But due to a minor, unpredictable 15-minute shift delay, a rookie Customs K-9 officer happened to be walking his Belgian Malinois across the tarmac, heading toward the break room. It was just a coincidence. As they passed within 8 feet of the titanium cases, the highly trained dog violently jerked the leash. The K-9 didn't just alert, it went into a frantic, aggressive scratch response against the thick titanium shell of the largest case. The officer stepped forward, assuming the dog had picked up a trace scent of agricultural contraband. Before he could touch the metal, a senior port supervisor rushed out from the shadows, physically blocking him. "Stand down," the supervisor barked. "That is diplomatic cargo. You touch that case, and you trigger an international incident." The handler backed away, apologizing, but as he turned his back, his tactical training took over. Handheld FL, our forward-looking infrared thermal camera from his tactical vest, a tool normally used to check for hidden compartments in vehicle tires. Shielding it with his body, he subtly pointed the lens at the titanium golf case. The thermal signature that appeared on the 3-inch screen made his blood run cold. There was no golf equipment inside. The screen displayed a glowing curled, distinct human heat signature measuring exactly 98.2 degrees. Someone was alive inside that locked metal box. And based on the 4-foot thermal footprint, it was a child. Initiate a silent surveillance protocol immediately. The handler whispered into his encrypted radio, completely bypassing his corrupt supervisor and calling the FBI directly. Within 90 seconds, federal agents and unmarked surveillance vehicles began tailing the armored death's U-verses as they left the airport boundaries. If that canine handler had simply walked away, 18 lives and a massive payload of poison would have disappeared forever into the concrete jungle of Manhattan. By 3:12, a joint task force of investigators from the FBI's Cyber Division, Homeland Security Investigations, and the DA hastily established a secure, off-site command center inside a fortified federal building. They were chasing a ghost. Cyber analysts spoiled the electronic flight plans to see exactly who had secured the Class 1 diplomatic status. The digital footprint lead investigators to a cluster of international all-governmental organizations. They uncovered for massive shell charities, all officially registered as global humanitarian relief funds. All 4 had been incorporated within the exact same 18-month period, holding tax-exempt status in the U.S., while routing their primary accounts through 3 highly secretive banks in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands. As forensic accountants began to dig into the routing numbers, the financial data exploded at a terrifying rate. Investigators documented exactly 4,214 offshore transactions executed over 36 straight months. The revenue scale was staggering $5.2 billion. Cartel drug money moved from the streets of America, bounced through encrypted European banking networks disguised as famine relief donations, and returned to New York to purchase commercial real estate private jets and political influence. But the financial trail was not the most troubling discovery. When federal analysts mapped the FAA physical flight paths over a 3-year period, they found an impossible pattern. This specific network had operated exactly 120 ghost flights into JFK's VIP terminal. Every single flight carried the exact same titanium golf cases. Every single flight was protected by diplomatic immunity. How does a $5.2 billion cartel fleet become legally untouchable? The FBI realized a horrifying truth. The cartel wasn't hiding from the law. They were using the law as an impenetrable shield. Someone with God-level authority within the international diplomatic community was actively issuing immunity passes to cartel smugglers, operating under absolute secrecy. Cyber agents requested the deep-level communications logs from the State Department's diplomatic clearance database. They found the architect. The credentials belonged to one man, Ambassador Tariq Osman, a highly respected diplomat serving as a special advisor on humanitarian logistics to the United Nations. Osman was an untouchable figure in New York's high society, attending galas with billionaires while simultaneously turning JFK into the largest cartel transit hub on the East Coast. Inside a biometric vault hidden within his $25 million penthouse, agents identified the existence of his personal operating ledger, the immunity book. It contained the names, offshore routing numbers, and classified blackmail material of 8 sitting United States federal judges. These judges were the fail-safe. They were paid millions to ensure that if any curious DEA agent ever tried to get a warrant to search the diplomatic cargo, the request would be immediately denied and buried. Osman had built a fortress of absolute legal immunity. The evidence was undeniable. The threat to national sovereignty was imminent. The federal government could not wait another minute. At 4:45 the State Department secretly suspended Osman's diplomatic visa, instantly stripping him of his protections. The breach order was given. A coordinated, multi-location federal raid struck New York City with the brutal, unstoppable force of a hurricane. Exactly 500 federal agents and 15 heavily armed SW-8E teams moved on 6 different targets in total darkness to prevent any suspect from warning another. At the JFK private terminal, tactical units breached the tarmac just as Flight N447 UN was unloading yet another shipment. Federal agents armed with M for carbines stormed the loading zone, commanding the corrupt private ground handlers to drop their radios. They were slammed onto the cold concrete and zip-tied. Simultaneously, an armored FBI strike team breached the reinforced mahogany doors of Ambassador Tariq Osman's 8,000 square foot Manhattan penthouse. Flashbang grenades shattered the morning silence with blinding white light and deafening force. SW-80 operators flooded the luxury apartment, clearing rooms methodically. Osman was found locked inside his private study, frantically trying to destroy the immunity book hard drives using a chemical acid burn bag. He was tackled to the marble floor, his hands zip-tied behind his back, his empire crumbling in seconds. The seizures were historic. Inside a climate-controlled warehouse in Queens, agents discovered an unimaginable stockpile, 6.2 tons of pure heroin, and exactly $314 million in physical cash, neatly stacked in vacuum-sealed bricks. But the most emotional moment came on the tarmac. I see tactical agents fired up industrial angle grinders, sending showers of orange sparks into the night sky as they cut open the titanium golf cases. Inside, they rescued 18 heavily sedated victims of human trafficking, pulling them from the darkest edges of the cartel supply chain just hours before they were meant to vanish forever. When the sun finally rose over Manhattan, the press conferences celebrated a massive, unprecedented victory for law enforcement. The national news declared the cartel's diplomatic pipeline permanently severed. But inside the highly secure, windowless briefing rooms in Washington, D.C., federal analysts were not celebrating. They were terrified. When FBI cyber experts fully decrypted Tariq Osman's seized immunity book, they didn't just find the blueprint for the New York operation. They found outgoing data transfers. They found ongoing active contracts, the diplomatic eggs. The absolute immunity shields used to blind law enforcement had already been sold. Financial records indicated that Osman had brokered the sale of this VIP system to cartel operatives utilizing diplomatic channels in London, Paris, and Los Angeles for $25 million per access code. The system was expanding. The replication model was already in motion. The architecture of corruption had metastasized far beyond a single airport. Corruption does not always appear in the form of street violence or armed cartels crossing a dusty border. Sometimes it hides behind perfectly tailored suits, diplomatic passports, and people at the absolute highest levels of global power who choose to sell their authority simply because the price is right. The historic arrests in New York dismantled one network, but they exposed a catastrophic vulnerability that threatens the entire civilized world. If a network this large and this sophisticated could operate flawlessly through the VIP terminals of America for 36 straight months, how many other diplomatic pouches are quietly passing through customs tonight? Was this the end of the cartel's ultimate smuggling ring, or just the beginning?